The new owners of the Kerbal Space Program franchise have been revealed, but don't get your hopes up just yet. Let's talk about it. Hello everybody and welcome! After a couple of weeks of guessing, we now know who has bought publisher Private Division and its titles, including Kerbal Space Program from Take-Two Interactive, at least according to an article by Jason Schreier for Bloomberg published this week. Some of the details, and the way other media outlets have reported on them, made people think that this might be good news for the Kerbal Space Program brand, because either it may result in the abandoned sequel KSP2 being revived again, or that this could be a chance to bring Kerbals to Kitten Space Agency, a spiritual successor currently being developed by a team at Rocketworks, which consists of a lot of original KSP developers. Unfortunately, both of these scenarios are highly unlikely. And some of the media out there need a lesson in journalism. I'll explain why in a moment, and if you are interested in these types of videos where I break down what's happening with space game development, make sure you are subscribed to this channel. We're close to reaching the 100,000 subscriber milestone, and every support you can provide helps out a lot to achieving this. If you aren't in the loop, here's a brief recap of recent events. In June 2024, Take-Two shut down development for Kerbal Space Program 2 and fired everyone involved in that project. Later that year, the corporation announced that it had sold publisher Private Division, which was in charge of the Kerbal franchise. KSP2 was supposed to be one of Private Division's flagship titles, but it released to poor reception and slow sales. If you want more details, I made a couple of videos about all of this, including a very in-depth piece about why KSP2's development was doomed from the start. I'll link it up top and in the description. So, what is the big news now? According to the Bloomberg report, quoting people familiar with the deal, Take-Two sold Private Division and its titles to Haveli Investments, a private equity firm which, according to its website, is committed to differentiated investing in the technology industry. Apparently their focus is software and gaming, and of course some of their team have AI analyst in their job title. I guess nowadays you can't be in the tech space without having an AI something or other. The report further states that Haveli has made a deal with the new company founded by former employees of indie publisher Annapurna Interactive, who had released one of my favorite games, Outer Wilds, among other titles. The reason why they are former employees is because the publisher imploded after some nasty disputes with their parent company. Since Annapurna Interactive was responsible for some decent indie games, people got their hopes up that those gaming veterans could pull the KSP franchise out of the mud. Would they continue working on KSP2? Would they start on a new Kerbal game? Would they team up with Rocketworks and join forces with the team already building Kitten Space Agency? Here's the part where I have to dash those hopes. In part because, in my opinion, misleading reporting by a couple of media outlets led to unfounded hype growing in the community. I'll give you a few examples. Games Industry writes the former Annapurna people acquire Private Division's portfolio. Rock Paper Shotgun claims they will take control of those games. IGN writes they will take over the portfolio. Eurogamer and PC Gamer also use the same verbiage. Game Developer even talks about a new studio that will be taking charge. It does make it sound a lot like those indie game veterans will now be the new owners and continue working on those abandoned games, right? Wrong! Remember Haveli, the private equity firm? They are the owners. They have probably paid dozens of millions of dollars to get those titles out of the hands of Take-Two. Just like every other private equity firm in existence, they want a return on their investment. That's their entire business model, says me, the business school graduate. And for this, Haveli have hired some publishing experts to sell the games they own. This is not a passion project, this is not aimed to finally make up the mishandled KSP2 development to the community. This is business. Plain and simple. Capitalism! Making a game that more or less simulates how our physical world works including a full solar system, then include a rocket building mechanic, vehicle physics, and all the other things that made the original KSP stand out, is long and hard work. Expensive work. This would not be a quick return on investment. Adding to that, the publisher now hired by Haveli are from a games publisher, not a development studio. There is no indication whatsoever right now that there is going to be any new code written for any Kerbal game. Yeah, I mentioned game developer wrote something about a new still unnamed studio, but they, like every other article out there, are not the original source. They are quoting Bloomberg. And nowhere, I repeat, nowhere is there any mention of a new studio in that scoop by Jason Schreier. Because if you talk about a studio, you talk about development, actual software being programmed. If you're talking about publishers, you talk about marketing, you talk about selling the product developed by the studio. So if you go back to the original source, the Bloomberg report, it states that Haveli struck a deal with the ex-Annapurna staffers to fund the new company and place them in charge of distributing the former private division titles. Distributing, not developing. New company, not new studio. I mean, English is not my native tongue, but even I understand the distinction. And what are they going to publish? The answer is former private division titles, including Tales of the Shire, out March 25, a farming game based on The Lord of the Rings. They will also take over the popular Kerbal Space Program series, as well as an unannounced title from Game Freak, the developer and co-owner of the Pokémon franchise. Basically, their job is to take what's already there and make sure it sells. I would expect them to focus on Tales of the Shire and that Game Freak title and try to maximize profit out of those any way they can. Bringing KSP2 back from the dead is a highly unlikely proposition in this scenario. Jason Schreier himself posted on Blue Sky that we shouldn't get our hopes up. But let's talk about the other option. Slapping the Kerbal brand onto Kitten Space Agency. For those of you who don't know yet, KSA was started by New Zealand studio Rocketworks, and people on the team include many former KSP and KSP2 developers, with even the original creator Harvester contributing to it. I did an in-depth video with Rocketworks CEO Dean Hall a couple of weeks ago, I'll link that as well. He doesn't believe that the Kerbal brand still holds the same value that it had before the release of KSP2, and from what Dean said elsewhere, they want to publish the game themselves, cutting out the middleman, so to speak. Therefore, unless some kind of miracle deal happens, I don't expect KSA to switch from kittens to Kerbals anytime soon. Speaking of KSA, I will continue to watch that game's progress and will report on what's going on there for all of you out there. The videos I did so far were received quite well from you, so I guess it's what you want to see. Which is of course why you should be subscribed to this channel. Finally, I need to get something off my chest concerning the general state of news media. Roughly 15 years ago, I myself was a full-time journalist for a respected national newspaper. And in order to get that job, I had to endure a couple of months of intensive training by veteran journalists. Back then, if I had delivered something like what I found when researching for this video, those trainers would have ripped me a couple of new orifices for being so sloppy. And rightly so. I'm going to highlight one specific piece for you, and hopefully this will help you recognize what to look for in a story when trying to gauge whether or not you can trust what is written in it, or if it is maybe a bit misleading. For this we're going to go through the article by Rock Paper Shotgun, but I could have taken any other piece honestly, this is just one awful example of many. First up, the title. Former Annapurna staff reportedly found new studio to rescue sold-off private division projects, including Game Freak Game and Kerbal Space Program 2. Right off the bat, the author swings and misses. New studio? Which new studio? I already said before, nothing in the original source says anything about a studio. Also, to rescue sold-off projects, including KSP2, nothing indicates that KSP2 is going to be rescued. There is no information at all how that rescue should even be performed. Also, if your title is so long that it breaks your layout, you're doing it wrong. But let's go on with the first paragraph. In a fairly exciting case of two major industry stories meeting in the middle. I'm sorry, is this a news report or an opinion piece? The breadcrumb on top says news, but calling this exciting, you're already injecting your opinion 4 words into the article. Let's continue. Former members of downfallen indie publisher Annapurna Interactive. Yes, that makes them sound like the underdogs fighting the powers that be. Everybody loves a story like that, right? Then a few more words, then projects in question include the Kerbal Space Program series and an unannounced project from Pokémon developer Game Freak. Here's the thing. I don't mind the Game Freak mention, but where is Tales of the Shire? That title was hyped up by Take-Two in their earnings call back when Private Division was still part of them, and it is also the title that will release next. Alright, you might argue KSP has a well-established fanbase and therefore is of more relevance to your readers. Still, not mentioning Tales of the Shire but instead listing the Kerbal franchise first distorts what is going to happen with the new ex-Annapurna publishing company. Then, the real kicker. That's from a new Bloomberg article, paywall, helpfully summarized by a game developer. Tell me you haven't read the original source without telling me you haven't read the original source. And that is also the reason why this article erroneously talks about a new studio, because they reference game developer, which themselves hallucinate about a studio, as we already talked about. It took me about 10 seconds to set up a disposable email address and register for Bloomberg's free article in order to get to the source. It's not that hard. Don't be lazy. Always go to the original source, whenever it's possible. Everything after that admission of guilt until the 5th paragraph is backstory about what happened to Annapurna and what happened to Private Division last year. Then one paragraph that has actually something to do with the story, then some additional information about Private Division title, which was not in the Bloomberg article, so there's at least some original content here. And then the final paragraph. I have a lot of love for Annapurna Interactive's lineup, particularly Outer Wilds. And it goes on to offer more opinion and speculation. Again, is this a news piece or an opinion piece? I know the lines have become blurred in today's media landscape, but there is a reason why respectable media still make that distinction. With this paragraph, the author at least lets us know that they are biased positively towards the former Annapurna staff, which probably has influenced certain verbiage I talked about earlier. If you are a journalist and you are reporting the news, your job is to report the news. Nobody cares about your opinion. Present the facts as they are known to you. If you want to be a storyteller and be a crafty wordsmith, you are in the wrong profession. Also, the SEO padding is strong with this one. The original source is less than 330 words. The rock, paper, shotgun version is more than 580 words. Lots of added fluff to appease the search engine algorithms. And the most important information is buried in the 5th paragraph, so people would have to scroll through your ad-infested site to get to the actual information, so that you can generate more ad impressions. It used to be the case that the most important information was supposed to be in the first paragraph of a news article. But a lot of outlets have abandoned that for an attention-grabbing title so that people would click on their piece and then force them to scroll through 4 or 5 ads until they get to the actual information. Journalists nowadays, if you can call them that, have unlearned how to make a news story interesting. They no longer structure their stories for reading comprehension to better inform the public, but are doing it only to maximize ad revenue. And unfortunately, these types of articles are those that are the most lucrative, because they use certain triggers and clickbait tricks to get you to go to their site and scroll through all those ads. Capitalism! Alright, I hope this sheds some light on the recent reporting that surfaced regarding the fate of the KSP2 franchise. As I said, don't get your hopes up for a revival of the Kerbal brand. This is a private equity firm using experienced publishing people to sell existing and upcoming titles, nothing more. In the meantime, Kerbal Space Program still exists. And despite all its flaws, there's still a lot of fun to be had in KSP2. And there's Juno, New Origins, and Rocket Science, and soon, hopefully, Kitten Space Agency. We're going to keep going to space, don't you worry. As usual, a huge thank you to my people over on Patreon and my YouTube members. If you feel like supporting what I do, please head on over there for some additional content and early access to videos. If you choose one of the higher tiers, your name will show up here, together with all of these wonderful folks. Thank you so much for your support. Me? I'm going to grab some torches and pitchforks and will visit some news media offices to teach them how it's done.
If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to my channel for more and follow me on my social thingies. The links are in the description. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.